do a quick demo to sort of show my approach to using and layering acrylic paint in a drawing. I'm going to start, as I often do, with ink and brush pen, and what I'm going for with this one is sort of a self-portrait of me going a little bit stir-crazy in this funky quarantine situation. If I haven't talked about it before, another kind of cool feature of this brush pen is that you can really control how much ink is on it. You can sort of squeeze it and get it really full of ink for really chunky stuff, or you can sort of dab it off with a paper towel and get much less of a flow if those are the kind of strokes you want. It's my kind of unruly quarantine mustache here. Realizing these self-portraits are looking more and more like my dad every time I do them. Let's see, it's a little... To get this sort of claustrophobic feeling, I'm gonna splatter never hurt anybody. Here, splatter some more. Now it's intentional. But I have no compunction about mixing ink with acrylic or colored pencil or any old thing that you want to use. Get things moving. I got some ink down, and now I'm just wiping it with a paper towel. It's a nice tone that way. Something over here. All right, this is plenty to get us started. So what I'm going to start doing now is basically coloring this with acrylic paint. And I tend to start with the darker colors and water them down a little bit, because darker colors in acrylic tend to be more transparent, and you can glaze with them, meaning you can layer them and work from light to dark, and they're not going to be terribly opaque, so you're going to be able to see your ink work through them like watercolor, only it dries much faster than watercolor, and the colors are a little richer. Right. So I've got just sort of like an ultramarine and a burnt sienna here. Just kind of glazing over the top. I'm thinking about the lighting now too. I'm thinking it'll be nice if he has sort of this like backlighting kind of creeping around the sides. And as I go, I sort of play with the texture and the strokes and try to build that into it. Now you don't see what I'm doing because I have the camera mounted on this table, but it's a mobile table, so I can actually spinning this while I'm painting, which I tend to do a lot. While I'm drawing and painting, I tend to turn the thing I'm drawing on, the illustration board or the sketchbook, which can sort of, facilitate certain strokes right? If your arm's comfortable moving one way, then you're not going to contort yourself so that you can fit into the surface you're drawing on. Just change the surface. I really got that from printmaking, I think, doing engravings and dry point where you sort of had to move the plate. Woodcuts, you had to move the block a little bit more than you even moved your drawing arm. You're sort of holding that still and moving the block away from it. See what I mean? Alright, and I'm going to start bringing some color into this, but I'm thinking of the color a little bit like an underpainting, because I know it's going to get quite a bit more later. I'm realizing too while I'm looking at this, there's sort of a feeling of like, I wanted this kind of pressure of this shape, but also this sense of like an hourglass, I'm realizing is there, like sort of conscious of time in a weird way. Bring a little bit more blue into it. Okay, now I am treating this like I'm painting it, but I know that we have a tendency not to push things as far as they need to go in terms of contrast and maybe texture, maybe detail, maybe finish. And so I've kind of come up with a way to speed that up. This is really adapted a bit from a technique that a great illustrator taught me, C.F. Payne, his method, which isn't quite this, but it's a similar idea where you take a drawing and you layer paint over it in such a way that you turn it into a painting and make it feel really finished and hopefully really rich in a short amount of time. And I'm extremely impatient, so that kind of thing really appeals to me. I can never resist red, and I find too that the palette I often end up with is some combination of red and green and yellow. Definitely a lot of red and yellow. And as I'm doing this, I'm thinking about it. I'm not just filling things in. I'm thinking, what color do I want here? And maybe why. I've got this blue that's emerged, that's coming in back here, which kind of, for one thing, helps visually push that back further because the cool color kind of recedes, but also suggests maybe a sky back there that's kind of like getting closed off by whatever these walls are. Something I talk about often in class is as you move forward, you're kind of remaking it with everything you do. Even if you like it, you don't want to feel like you're preserving something. You're always destroying what came before and redrawing, and you have to be really fearless about it and take risks, and could be totally ruined, or it could get ruined and then saved, or turned into something else. But you can't treat it too preciously. You've got to make it care enough about it to put in the effort and the time, but you have to take the risk of covering things, losing things, and trust yourself that you can maybe pull it back out. So I could keep pushing this and maybe get it to a point that I like, but I am going to take what in a way is sort of a shortcut. I'm going to take a really big brush, a really big shader, and I'm going to create kind of a neutral tone, sort of a mixture of warm and cool. And I am going to paint over this thing. Let's do it side to side. I'm going to mix a little bit of magenta into it. Why not? Okay, so now I'm not being completely arbitrary with this. I'm thinking about what kind of texture do I want, what direction do I want for these brush strokes, and maybe I want to, maybe that's a little better. Yeah. I'm being bold with it, right? And I'm leaving enough behind so that as sort of markers, so that I know what's there, I know what's underneath. I'm not covering it completely, so I don't have to start over. But I am sort of giving myself a middle tone, a fresh slate, a texture, and I'm going to let that dry, because if you go back over wet acrylic, it pulls it back up and really doesn't look good. Alright, now it's nice and dry, so we're going to get to a point that I find to be pretty fun. Now I get out the more opaque, the lighter colors, the less transparent acrylic colors, or mix white into it. And now I can work dark to light a bit and think about where my highlights might go, where my light source would be. Right? I think it might be sort of generally something down. If you don't want to lay your hand in what you're doing, then just grab a little scrap of paper or something. Start with some highlights on the eyes. I don't know why I like the idea that they're sort of red, bloodshot. And let's have a look at the teeth. Eyes and teeth, I feel like, always usually end up being very important, at least for my stuff. So again, I think it's important to remember that I'm remaking it. I'm not trying to now tighten up and color in the lines. I'm just doing the drawing, but now I'm doing it with light and paint. I'm making a new drawing where the other was. And actually I do have a scan of the original drawing that I can refer to for lighting or anything that might have been lost if I want to bring it back. Maybe I don't. Maybe it's going to go in a very new direction. And as I'm working on this, I keep thinking that I want to bring back the magenta and maybe some of the blue. Why does he need blue under his eyes? I'm not sure. It's just kind of like the bags under the eyes kind of thing. Bring it up here. I always like to, if I'm using a color one place, I like to sort of move it around so I get a little bit everywhere. I think of it as like cross-pollination. It makes it feel like it's all part of the same world. It's all getting hit by the same light. If we color, each element separately, then it starts to feel a little disjointed, a little flat. Alright, we're in the thick of it. I'm battling with this thing, and I think, as you know, most of these things, these paintings, go through sort of an ugly phase before we figure them out. And I think he's starting to come out of it. Got to battle the nose a bit more. You know, he's not close to done, but he's emerging. And I'm realizing too, I liked the pink eyes before when I had cooler shadows up here, but then I realized I needed warmer shadows on the face, so I'm gonna go another direction with the eyes. Alright, the eyes are getting a yellow treatment, which I think is gonna work. I don't know why yellow eyes work, but they often seem to. At least for an intense character like this. And also I've put off bringing white into it for as long as possible. Definitely don't want to overdo white, but you can see I have just a smidge of it in the teeth, and it's getting to the point where we do need a little bit. The eyes. See, look at that. I just love how that really just, look at that little bit of white. It really makes it pop, right? Okay, for me there's quite a bit of pushing and pulling back and forth, trying to find sort of where I need my highlights to go. And what temperature, you know, I'm realizing this in here is a little bit too warm, but I think it's in vaguely the right place. So we're getting there. All right, I think I'm gonna pretty much call this done. A lot of pushing and pulling back and forth, light and dark, warm and cool. I thought it needed just a little bit more of a light line in there, so I'm actually scratching into the illustration board with X-Acto knife carefully.